So as you may know, all the insane changes coming to the next patch have been postponed for a later release date once the devs change enough about them. But that doesn't mean that the balance changes happening in this patch are reverted, like the Michael Myers rework, various killer nerfs and buffs, as well as the general perk changes that are not tied to these mechanics. So let's talk about it. And let's start with what has been one of the most divisive reworks I have ever seen, as the majority of them are either hated or loved. In this case, there are some players saying that this rework kills Michael Myers, whereas others find this rework to be very cool, and I am part of the second side. Myers is now a stance change killer, being able to change from Stalker mode, where he is undetectable and can stalk survivors, to Pursuer mode, where he is a glorified M1 killer with a smaller turn radius and some perks partially base kit. Once you stalk survivors enough, you can enter Evil Within, which is a temporal tier 3 state where you get access to Slaughtering Strike, a glorified M1 attack that you can charge to go further and instantly down survivors and break pallets quite fast. Then it enters a cooldown. The funniest part is that you can technically replicate this rework in the live game already, as this build is basically what this Myers going to be once the rework releases. In fact, this might be the reason I enjoy this rework so much, because it is literally my most used build on him. So let's go over the good parts first, and immediately the biggest positive of this rework is how strong this version is compared to old Myers, and his Slaughtering Strike attack is very lethal, very easy to get with the new stalking changes, and allows him to outplay a lot of loops and even zone survivors thanks to breaking pallets so fast, which funnily enough finally gives me that vibe that Myers is an unstoppable force, as he is, along with Nemesis, the only killers that can move after breaking a pallet. I could make an argument as to why Myers has potential to become a new A tier somewhere close to Chucky, because with this rework, he looks like a stronger Chucky. Both have a stealth component, only Myers is better. Both have a dash attack, only Myers can break pallets and insta down, and Myers has some very good add-ons too, giving him an insane amount of build variety, finally fixing the issue of his add-ons being severely outdated, with some being absolute trash, like the stalking movement speed add-ons or those dumb add-ons that only worked in tier 1. Now there are 3 problems with this rework, with the first one being easy to fix. In the PTB, Myers felt very clunky, and I think he might be unfinished, as some of his animations were very broken, like entering the new Evil Within state, which for some reason reuses the basic attack cooldown, and it looks like he is inspecting his knife like an animation on Counter-Strike, or how his knife glows with a very cheap effect, and sometimes it straight up stops working when dashing. Perhaps the most noticeable effect is the lack of the animation of him pulling the knife up when he is in Evil Within, which was something very special from original Myers that I miss a lot on that PTB. I also absolutely despise the fact that you get locked out of Stalker mode when you have enough stock points to get Evil Within, so I literally cannot play in a stealthy way unless I bring a specific build for it, and I don't see the design reason as to why this is the case. When Myers has his stock fully done, a global sound plays for everyone, and he gets slowed down when activating it, so giving Myers Stalker mode when he is currently full would allow him to come close to a survivor and ambush them. With the current version, you cannot do that, and it completely contradicts his stance change playstyle. If I want to be stealthy, let me be stealthy. In fact, for some reason there is also a stock decay meter, where if you don't stalk survivors for 20 seconds, your progress resets to 50%, which I genuinely don't understand why is the case, considering the 3 big buffs they gave to survivors so they are aware on what stage Myers is before it happens. The stalking sound. He's already halfway done. The global sound of having Myers tier 3 ready. Okay. And the massive slowdown when activating the power. The third problem is how this rework kills the identity of the original Michael Myers. The original version, especially after the rework, was movie accurate, as you had to stalk survivors from afar in order to ambush them and instantly pop tier 3. He felt like a scary ambusher, similar to Ghostface. Now, his gameplay is completely different and there is basically no stealth element. You stay in Stalker mode since Pursuer mode is basically useless, you stalk survivors now that it's infinite per survivor and the range is shorter. and you get Evil Within extremely fast, so you can basically have it all the time. So Myers feels less stealthy to use than before, but he has a higher skill ceiling now, as the ambush attack has a lot of mind games that you can do with it, similar to Chucky. After all, the original Myers was literally a glorified M1 killer, and his skill ceiling was something you could reach just by playing one match. At this point, I think it's a choice. Do we make Myers movie accurate at the cost of him sucking because stealth killers are weaker overall? Or do we give him the extended lunge to make him actually viable for the first time in ages without needing any add-ons? It's also important to note that for any reworks for licensed characters, the license holders have to accept first if the vision of the character fits the game, so according to them, it does. This situation reminds me a lot of how people said Springtrap did not fit when it was designed with Scott Cawthon's input. I am very curious on what you think about this rework, if you're a fan of it or if you are a hater, as I've seen compelling arguments for both sides. If it's my choice, like I said, I like this rework because gameplay wise, it's going to be much fun now that you can do so many different builds, unlike with old Myers where he was only viable with Tombstone Piece. Next up, let's talk about the killer with the biggest balance change, and that is the Unknown. And as a massive fan of this killer, let me tell you, I am very happy about one change and not so much regarding the rest. So the biggest change by far is the fact that now Unknown has no camera lock when looking up. So now you can do insane artillery shots like this one. This opens up a lot of new insane orbital shots that were not possible before, so obviously I am very happy with this change. If only you could shoot the UVX on the ground to make it harder for survivors to counterplay on dead zones. The only sad thing about Unknown is that when pulling out the UVX, it can be heard globally, and since the bullet velocity of the projectile itself is so slow, attentive survivors can avoid it if they are well aware. Now as for the other buffs, first of all, survivors will have a longer weekend duration after being hit with the UVX, which fixes a very annoying problem Unknown had, where survivors would lose the weekend before you had time to get the UVX back. The second buff is making the teleport allow you to move faster by a very small amount, but it's still a buff regardless. The problem of these changes are the add-ons, because they are very underwhelming. The majority of add-on changes are so small that they will be meaningless most of the time, and the only add-on that got a major change is Vanishing Box, which just got completely gutted with no decent compensation. If the devs find this add-on problematic to the point it needs such a severe nerf, then make it an iridescent add-on so it's rarer to play against, or rework its effect, which if I could pick, I would go for option 2. At this point, I would even take a rework to blurry photo since the effect now is so small that it's not worth it. A lot of the add-ons of the Unknown are very boring and they don't change its playstyle at all, so in a way Unknown reminds me a lot of original Pyramid Head where there is only one playstyle and that's it. There are no add-ons that transform its power besides the iridescent ones. I would love if they gave Unknown an add-on that allows him to see the auras of survivors after a UVX hit, so you can do a follow-up after an orbital, or an add-on that gives you the undetectable after you teleport to a clone. Even one where you can place more clones around the map, but teleporting on them would delete them, so you have a different playstyle. Just something so there are build potentials like with new Myers or new Pyramid Head. Now let's go over the miscellaneous changes in the PTB, starting with the one that I believe will get reverted. The Oni now gets 5 blood orbs per hook instead of 2 like before, and this was done because the slugging changes hurt him. However, now that the slug changes are gone, I think this buff is going to be reverted since it no longer makes sense. I do have to say that even with this buff, it's not enough compensation for how bad the slugging changes were for him. Dracula had various balance changes down to all of his forms as well as some add-ons. Vampire form had a nerf to the speed while charging flame pillars, but they compensated by making the movement speed faster after you miss, reduce the cooldown of the pillar attack, and increase its range. Wolf form got nerfed as the devs deemed this form to be too strong, so increased charge time of Pounce attack and reduced the Scent Orb spawns. Finally, Bat form is less slippery overall, making it easier to control. I understand why Wolf was nerfed, as it followed the logic of the Clown, as they saw a lot of people use Wolf form but not Vampire form as it was weak. However, the problem of these changes is that Wolf form is still the best form and Vampire form only strength was zoning, which Wolf form does better too. so I personally don't think these changes are going to impact Dracula at all, but since I am not a main, I won't be very firm on this. Talking about the clown, his changes were partially reverted. Now he's in the middle between original clown and this current clown. Now, his yellow bottles activate in 1.6 seconds from 1 second, and his purple gasp now has a lingering effect for 1.6 seconds. Not as brain dead as before, but clown is a very easy killer to play brain dead if you wanted to, so I am not sure if these changes are going to be healthy overall, and I think it's just best to revert clown completely back to how he was. And finally, let's talk about the perk changes. And as you will see on this screen, I think these are the only perk changes that will not go forwards with the live release. So that means all the rest of perks will be changed. And for example, Vigil will be nerfed, Hope will be nerfed, but Plot Twist will not be buffed, if you catch my drift. Now I think the most impactful changes regarding the perks are Oppression, which got buffed to 4 instead of 3 and has a reduced cooldown, and Ultimate Weapon, which was very nicely buffed in my opinion. The problem is that Monitor and Abuse will get a nerf with these changes, and Leverage too, depending on how you see it. Also, I am very sad to say that the Deerstalker rework, which was very interesting as a perk concept, will not be live, due to the fact that it was tied to the slugging changes. Also, despite the fact that No Mither was tied to the slugging changes, I think adding Iron Will base kit for that perk is not a bad idea, and I don't think it will change much for the game. Anyways, let me know what you think about all of these changes, and especially about the Myers rework, which we will most likely see on the 23rd of September. As always, a huge thanks to the members of YouTube that allow me to make these videos. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a nice day.